My name is Stephanie Adams, and I'm 32 years old. I never thought my perfect life would shatter in the span of 15 seconds. The time it took to realize those voices coming from my bedroom weren't from the TV. I had just rushed home to grab my forgotten keys before a career-defining meeting, but instead found myself frozen in the hallway, my hand clutching the railing as I recognized my husband Jason's voice, and then a woman's laugh I'd never heard before. The unmistakable sounds that followed confirmed my worst fears instantly. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit subscribe, and stay with me, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about love, betrayal, and my own strength. Growing up in a small town in Minnesota, I was always the girl with big plans. I worked through college, earned scholarships, and landed my first marketing job in Chicago at 22. It wasn't glamorous, mostly creating social media content for small businesses, but it was my foot in the door. I spent weekends networking, evenings taking online courses, and holidays volunteering for free marketing projects just to build my portfolio. By 25, I had worked my way up to a mid-level position at a respected marketing firm. My life revolved around deadlines, client presentations, and the occasional weekend with friends. Romance wasn't even on my radar until my college roommate Jenna invited me to her wedding in Lake Geneva. That's where I met Jason Adams, the charming best man who managed to make horrible dance moves look endearing. Marketing director by 30, I told him when he asked about my 5-year plan during our first conversation. Financial security by 35, he countered with a confident smile. Jason was 29 then, working as a junior financial analyst at Marshall & Brooks, a prestigious firm in downtown Chicago. We exchanged numbers that night, and by the following weekend, we were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant where Jason impressed me by speaking broken Italian to our server. He was ambitious, but had a playfulness I lacked. Where I was all structure and goals, Jason brought spontaneity. Weekend trips to nearby towns, surprise picnics, unexpected flowers. He reminded me there was life outside of my career trajectory. 2 years of dating followed. 2 years of building what I believed was an unshakable foundation. Jason proposed on a boat during sunset on Lake Michigan, and I said yes, without hesitation. The wedding was everything I'd wanted. Intimate, elegant, with only our closest friends and family present. We honeymooned in Greece, and I remember thinking how lucky I was to have found my person, my partner, my home. 3 years ago, we purchased our house in the suburbs, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a backyard perfect for the family we planned to start someday after our careers were established. Each morning, we'd have coffee together before leaving for work. Jason would kiss me goodbye, always saying the same thing: "Go conquer the world, Steph." Our evenings involved cooking together, sharing work stories, or binge-watching whatever series had captured our interest. Weekends were for home projects, seeing friends, or occasionally hosting dinner parties where everyone commented on how perfect we seemed together. Last year, I finally achieved my goal, marketing director at 31, a year ahead of schedule. The promotion came with a significant pay increase, more responsibility, and longer hours. Jason celebrated my success with champagne and a weekend getaway. "I'm so proud of you," he said, raising his glass. "You're extraordinary." The new position was demanding. I was managing a team of 12, handling our biggest accounts and constantly proving myself in a male-dominated executive setting. Some nights I'd come home after 9, exhausted but fulfilled. Jason seemed supportive, often having dinner waiting or understanding when I needed to work weekends. His own career was thriving too. He'd been promoted to senior financial analyst, working with the firm's wealthiest clients. With our combined incomes, we were living comfortably, taking luxury vacations, and saving for our future. From the outside, we were the couple who had it all. Looking back, I should have noticed the subtle shifts. Jason started working later too, often texting that he'd be home after I was already in bed. He changed his cologne without mentioning it. His phone, once casually left on coffee tables or counters, was suddenly always in his pocket, and he'd changed the password. When I asked about it, he said it was a new company's security policy. There were weekends when he'd disappear for hours, claiming he was meeting colleagues for golf or drinks. I never questioned it. We both had busy professional lives and valued our independence. That's what I told myself anyway. Last month, he suggested we postpone our plans to start trying for a baby. "Let's give it another year," he said. "Let you settle into your director role, let me work toward partner." It made logical sense, so I agreed, ignoring the slight disappointment I felt. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I woke at 5:30, went for a quick run, showered, and prepared for an important presentation with a potential client worth millions to our firm. Jason was still sleeping when I kissed his forehead and whispered goodbye. He mumbled something and rolled over. Halfway to the office, I realized I'd forgotten my presentation materials and my keys. Cursing under my breath, I turned around, already calculating how late I'd be for the 9 o'clock meeting. Traffic was heavy, adding to my frustration. I called my assistant, asking her to delay the clients with coffee and the promotional videos until I arrived. When I pulled into our driveway at 8:15, I noticed Jason's car was still there. Strange. He usually left by 7:30. I figured he might be working from home or feeling unwell. Using the spare key hidden in the garden gnome, Jason's idea, not mine, I unlocked the front door, planning to grab my things and leave without disturbing him. That's when I heard it, laughter coming from upstairs. Our bedroom. I remember checking my watch, 8:17 a.m., as I stood in the entryway of our home. The sound of voices continued from upstairs, muffled but distinct. My first thought was that Jason had turned on the TV, perhaps calling in sick and watching a morning show. But then I heard him speak clearly, followed by a woman's response. My body reacted before my mind could process what was happening. I froze, one hand still holding my car keys, the other gripping the banister of our staircase. I didn't consciously decide to remain silent or to listen, but some instinct kept me rooted to that spot, barely breathing. "We can't keep doing this, Jason," the female voice said, a playful tone contradicting her words. "Someone's going to catch us eventually." "Steph won't be home until late," my husband replied, his voice carrying the relaxed tone he used when completely at ease. "Besides, she's completely focused on this big client meeting today. She won't notice anything." A light, feminine laugh followed. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." 5 years of marriage, and she still thinks I'm the same guy she met at that wedding. The physical sensation that hit me was unlike anything I'd experienced, like being submerged in ice water while simultaneously feeling burning heat spread through my chest. My vision actually blurred around the edges, tunneling to focus on the staircase leading to our bedroom, where another woman was with my husband. "What about the weekend? Can you get away?" the woman asked. "Already handled. Told her I have that financial conference in Detroit. Booked a room at the Peninsula instead. We can order room service and not leave for 2 days." The Detroit conference. Jason had mentioned it 3 weeks ago, showing me the email invitation. I'd even helped him pick out a new tie to wear for his presentation. Except apparently, there was no presentation. There was no conference. There was just my husband planning a weekend with his lover? Girlfriend? I didn't even know what to call her. "Megan." Jason's voice softened in a way that sent another wave of nausea through me. "You know you're the best thing that's happened to me in years, right?" Megan. The name registered instantly. Megan Phillips, Jason's assistant at the firm. Petite, blonde, maybe 26 or 27. I'd met her at the company Christmas party last December. She'd complimented my dress and asked about our recent trip to Cabo. Jason had introduced us with his hand on the small of my back, the picture of a devoted husband. "Steph, this is Megan, the assistant who keeps me organized." We'd all laughed. I'd even told her how grateful I was that she helped my husband so much. Their conversation continued, but the specific words became fuzzy as my mind raced through recent memories, recontextualizing them with this new information. Jason working late. Jason's weekend golf games with the guys that left him mysteriously refreshed rather than exhausted and sunburned. The text notifications he'd quickly dismiss when we were together. the diminishing intimacy between us that I'd attributed to our busy schedules. I should have confronted them. Later, I would imagine alternate scenarios where I stormed upstairs, threw open the door, and demanded explanations. But in that moment, some combination of shock, self-preservation, and perhaps dignity kept me silent. Moving as quietly as I had entered, I stepped backward toward the front door. My presentation materials sat on the console table where I'd left them yesterday, my work keys beside them. I grabbed both and slipped out, gently pulling the door closed. In my car, I sat motionless, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house I'd lovingly decorated, the home I thought we were building together. My phone buzzed, my assistant wondering where I was. The meeting, the clients, my career. None of it seemed to matter anymore. I started the engine and drove, but not toward the office. I had no destination in mind, just an overwhelming need to be away from that house and what it now represented. I drove for nearly an hour, eventually finding myself at a lakefront park where Jason and I had once had a picnic celebration after my promotion. Sitting on a bench overlooking Lake Michigan, I finally allowed myself to feel the full impact of what I'd discovered. The trembling began in my hands and spread until my whole body shook with silent sobs. My marriage, which I'd believed was solid despite the usual challenges, was a facade. My husband, the man I trusted most in the world, had been lying to me for how long? Weeks? Months? The memory of their casual conversation suggested a well-established affair. Someone's going to catch us eventually. How many times had they been together in our home? In our bed? The violation felt physical, as if someone had reached inside my chest and crushed my heart in their fist. My phone continued buzzing throughout the morning. Text messages from my assistant, then my boss, then teammates concerned about my unprecedented absence. Finally, I managed to send a brief message to my boss. Family emergency. Can't make it today. So sorry. It was all I could manage. By noon, Jason started texting too. Hey, how's the big meeting going? Steph? Everything okay? Getting worried. Call me when you can. Each message was another twist of the knife. The casual deception, the performance of a concerned husband while he'd been with her just hours before. I couldn't bring myself to respond. As afternoon turned to evening, I remained in a daze, driving aimlessly around the city, stopping occasionally at random coffee shops where I'd stare blankly at untouched drinks. My mind kept replaying fragments of their conversation, interspersed with memories I now questioned. Our anniversary dinner last month. Had he been thinking of her while toasting to many more years together? The weekend trip to visit my parents. Had he been texting her while claiming to check work emails? By 7 that evening, exhaustion and practicality finally penetrated my emotional fog. I couldn't drive around forever. I needed a place to sleep, clothes, a plan. But the thought of returning home, of possibly seeing Jason, was unbearable. I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a hotel near O'Hare Airport, as far from our suburban home as I could reasonably get while still being in Chicago. In the anonymous comfort of a standard hotel room, I finally called my boss, crafting a vague explanation about a family health crisis. Then I turned off my phone, unable to face any more messages from Jason or concerned friends. I lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, feeling as though I was floating outside my body, observing someone else's tragedy. Sleep didn't come until the early hours of the morning, and when it did, it offered no relief. I dreamed of running through our house, opening door after door, each revealing Jason with Megan in various scenes of domestic bliss, cooking together, laughing, planning their future. I woke at dawn, sweating and disoriented, momentarily forgetting where I was and why. The harsh reality of my situation hit me anew as consciousness returned. Within 24 hours, my life had completely unraveled, and I had no idea what came next. The hotel room became my refuge for the next 2 days. I moved between the bed and the small desk by the window, alternating between periods of emotional numbness and overwhelming pain. My phone remained off except for brief moments when I'd check messages, responding only to work emails with vague updates about my family emergency. Jason's messages evolved from casual concern to evident panic. "Stephanie, please let me know you're okay. I've called the hospitals. Please just tell me you're safe. I'm filing a missing person report if I don't hear from you by tomorrow." That last one finally prompted a response. "I'm safe. Need time. Don't contact me." I turned the phone off immediately after sending it. On the second night, around midnight, I finally powered my phone back on and called Amy, my best friend since college. She answered immediately, despite the hour. "Steph? Oh my God, are you okay? Everyone's worried sick." "Jason's cheating on me," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth, the first time I'd spoken them aloud. "I caught him with his assistant. Well, I heard them. In our bedroom." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds before Amy exhaled slowly. "Oh, Steph. I'm so sorry. Did you know?" I asked, suddenly suspicious of everyone in my life. "Did anyone know?"
"No."
"God, no." She paused. But what?" I had concerns. Small things. The way he looked at her at your Christmas party. How he always mentioned her in stories. I told myself I was imagining things. Her words hit me like another betrayal. "Why didn't you say something?" "And say what, exactly?" "Hey, I think your husband might have a thing for his assistant based on absolutely no evidence. Would you have believed me?" She was right, of course. I wouldn't have. I would have defended Jason, maybe even distanced myself from Amy for suggesting it. The realization of how completely I'd trusted him made me feel naive and foolish. Amy listened as I recounted what I'd overheard, occasionally making sounds of sympathy or outrage. When I finished, she said, "You can stay with me, you know, as long as you need." "I need to figure this out on my own first," I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure what figuring it out would entail. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and did what any person in crisis does in the digital age. I began researching articles about infidelity, signs you missed, what to do next, legal websites explaining Illinois divorce laws. The screen glowed in the dark hotel room as I educated myself on the dissolution of a marriage, alternating between practical research and falling down social media rabbit holes. That's how I found them. Innocent-looking photos on Instagram and Facebook. Office team lunches, where they sat next to each other. A company charity 5K, where they wore matching team shirts. In one photo from a firm holiday party that Jason had attended solo because I had a work conflict, they stood in a group of colleagues. Nothing overtly suspicious except for the way they leaned slightly toward each other, a gravitational pull visible even in a casual snapshot. Most damning was a comment Megan had left on one of Jason's posts 3 months ago, a hiking photo he'd taken on what was supposedly a solo weekend trip to clear his head. Her comment was innocuous enough. Great view. Nature at its finest. But it was the familiarity, the implication that she knew exactly where, and when the photo was taken, that confirmed what I already knew. He hadn't been alone on that mountain. Sleep eluded me that night as rage replaced shock. I dedicated 5 years to our marriage, compromised on countless decisions, supported his career, kept our home, planned our future, all while he betrayed me with a woman nearly 6 years my junior. The unfairness burned through me, morphing into a cold, clarifying anger by morning. On the third day, I checked out of the hotel with a decision made. I would confront Jason, but on my terms, after gathering evidence and consulting a lawyer. I wasn't going to be the hysterical, blindsided wife. I would approach this like any other challenge in my life, with preparation, strategy, and dignity. I booked a different hotel closer to my office, went shopping for essential clothes and toiletries, and called the office to explain I'd be working remotely for the remainder of the week due to ongoing family issues. My boss, concerned but understanding, agreed. That afternoon, I met with a divorce attorney, a stern-looking woman named Patricia Jenkins who listened without interruption as I explained my situation. When I finished, she nodded once and said, You did the right thing by not confronting them immediately. Emotion clouds judgment, and you need clear judgment now. She outlined my options, explained how infidelity could impact divorce proceedings in Illinois, less than I'd hoped, and advised me on what evidence to gather and what financial precautions to take. I left her office with a checklist and a sense of purpose that had been missing since that morning in the hallway. The following day, while Jason was at work, I returned to our house. Walking through the front door felt surreal. Everything looked exactly the same as it had before. The same photos of us smiling from vacations and celebrations. The same furniture we'd carefully selected together. The same coffee mug Jason used every morning, sitting washed and ready in the dish rack. I moved through the house methodically, following my lawyer's advice. I photographed financial documents, made copies of tax returns, downloaded bank statements, and took inventory of our assets. In Jason's home office, I found a hidden folder in his desk containing hotel receipts, restaurant bills for places we'd never visited together, and a jewelry store receipt for a white gold necklace I'd never received. In our bedroom, the scene of the betrayal, I hesitated before entering. The bed had been made, the room tidied. No evidence remained of what had transpired there just days ago. I opened Jason's nightstand drawer and found nothing unusual. Then, on impulse, I lifted the mattress on a side of the bed and discovered a small velvet pouch. Inside was a woman's bracelet with a delicate charm, a tiny compass. The gift card still tucked inside read, "To help you always find your way back to me. Love, M." The intimate nature of the gift, hidden in our marital bed, broke through the protective armor I'd been constructing. I sank to the floor, the bracelet clutched in my hand, as deep, painful sobs tore through me. This wasn't just sex. This wasn't just a fling. The level of deception, the emotional investment implied by such a personal gift, suggested something far more devastating. He loved her. While recovering from this latest blow, I noticed the iPad we shared for household matters on the bedside table. Jason had always used it more than I did, managing our shared calendar and home automation systems. On a hunch, I opened it and found he was still logged into his personal email. With shaking hands, I typed Megan into the search bar. Hundreds of results appeared, dating back nearly 11 months. I sorted by oldest first and began reading. The initial emails were professional, normal communications between an executive and his assistant. Then they shifted subtly. Jokes, personal comments, weekend work sessions that ran late. By 4 months in, they were explicitly planning their first night together, while I was on a business trip to New York. The most recent emails discussed their future, Jason expressing confusion about what comes next and Megan gently pushing for clarity about us in the long term. One particular exchange from 2 months ago stopped my breath entirely. Megan, "I hate being the other woman. What are we doing here, Jason? Really?" Jason, "I'm trying to figure things out. Stephanie and I have history, a life built together. But with you, I feel alive again. Just give me time."
Time.
He wanted time to decide which woman he would choose. While I planned our future, worked on our home, considered when we would start our family, my husband was weighing whether to stay with me or leave for his assistant. I forwarded the entire email thread to my personal account, then searched for any financial information. That's when I discovered transfers from our joint savings account to a private account I'd never seen before. Nearly $30,000 moved over the past 6 months in increments small enough that I might not notice while reviewing our joint statements. By the time I left the house 3 hours later, I had comprehensive documentation of both the affair and financial impropriety. I also had a shattered heart and a clarity I hadn't possessed before. This wasn't a single mistake or a brief lapse in judgment. This was calculated, sustained betrayal by the person I had trusted most in the world. As I pulled away from our home, no longer ours in my mind, Jason called again. This time, I answered. "Stephanie? Thank God. Where are you? Are you okay?" "I've been losing my mind." His voice, once my favorite sound, now felt like acid in my ears. "I'll be home tomorrow at 6, I said flatly. "We need to talk." Steph, whatever's wrong. I hung up before he could finish. There was nothing more to say until we were face to face. The time for hiding was over. When I pulled into our driveway the next evening at exactly 6 o'clock, Jason rushed out the front door before I'd even turned off the engine. He looked disheveled, unshaven, hair uncombed, wearing the same Northwestern University t-shirt he'd slept in for years. The familiar sight sent an unexpected pang through my chest. "Stephanie," he breathed, reaching for me as I exited the car. I stepped back, avoiding his touch. His expression shifted from relief to confusion. "What's going on? Where have you been?" "I filed a police report. I thought you were hurt or worse." "Let's talk inside," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I walked past him toward the house, sensing him following close behind. In our kitchen, the heart of our home where we'd cooked countless meals together, shared wine and secrets, planned our future, I turned to face the man I'd married. Really looked at him for the first time since discovering his betrayal. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale with stress. He looked genuinely concerned. "A skilled performer, my husband." "Stephanie, please," he started again. "Whatever's wrong, whatever I did. How long have you been sleeping with Megan?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, closed, opened again.
"What?"
"I don't lie to me. Not anymore." I placed my phone on the counter, open to the emails I'd forwarded to myself. 11 months, Jason. Nearly a year of lying to my face every day. He stared at the phone, then back at me, calculation replacing shock. "You went through my emails? You invaded my privacy." The audacity of his response ignited something in me. "Your privacy?" My voice rose for the first time. "You brought another woman into our bed. You've been having an affair in our home, while I worked to build our life together. Don't you dare talk to me about privacy." Jason's demeanor changed, his shoulders slumping as he recognized the futility of denial. "It's not what you think," he tried, his voice softer. "Things between us had changed. You were always working, always distracted. So this is my fault." I interrupted, incredulous. "I was working to build the career I've always been transparent about wanting. The career you claim to support and admire." "I did."
"Ido."
He ran a hand through his hair. "But you have to admit, Steph, we grew apart. When was the last time we really connected? Really talked about anything besides work or household logistics?" "So you discussed that with your spouse," I said, fighting to maintain control. "You don't start sleeping with your assistant behind your wife's back." He flinched at the directness. "It wasn't planned. It just happened. We were working late and, spare me the details," I cut him off. "I heard enough on Tuesday morning when I came home to get my keys." His expression changed again, realization dawning. "Tuesday? You were here?" "I heard everything, Jason. Your plans for the weekend. The Peninsula Hotel, not the Detroit conference. How Stephanie won't notice anything." I mimicked his tone with bitter accuracy. He paled further. "You were spying on us?" "I came home to get my keys and presentation materials," I said, my voice rising again. "I wasn't spying. I was coming home to my house." The conversation devolved from there. Jason alternated between apologizing and justifying, claiming he'd been unhappy, feeling neglected, needing validation. When these approaches failed to move me, he switched to anger, accusing me of being cold, career-obsessed, emotionally unavailable. "You've been checked out of this marriage for 2 years," he said, his own voice rising. "You're here physically, but you're not present. Megan listens to me. She sees me while collecting a paycheck from your firm and planning weekend getaways with my husband." I replied coldly. "She sounds like a real humanitarian." "Don't blame her for this," Jason snapped, a flash of protectiveness in his eyes that hurt more than anything else. "This is about us, about what went wrong between us."
"No, Jason."
"There's no us problem that justifies what you did. If you were unhappy, you could have talked to me, suggested counseling, asked for a divorce even. Instead, you lied to my face for nearly a year while sleeping with another woman in our bed." It wasn't just about sex, he said quietly. Those 6 words confirmed what the emails and bracelet had suggested. This wasn't just physical infidelity. He had genuine feelings for her. I know, I said, my voice breaking slightly. I saw the emails. I found the bracelet. Jason's eyes widened. You went through my things? I went through our house gathering evidence of your betrayal. I corrected him. Including the $30,000 you've been siphoning from our joint savings. He had the decency to look ashamed about the money, at least. I was setting it aside. For contingencies. For a new life with Megan? I pressed. His silence was confirmation enough. How could you do this? I asked, the question that had been haunting me for days finally escaping. 5 years, Jason. 5 years of building a life together. I didn't plan to hurt you, he said, sounding genuinely remorseful for the first time. I care about you, Stephanie. I always will. But our marriage has been dead for a long time. We've just been going through the motions. That's what people in affairs tell themselves to justify their behavior, I replied. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it wasn't dead until you killed it. We stared at each other across the kitchen island, 2 people who once promised to love each other forever, now virtual strangers. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Jason spoke again. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now you leave, I said firmly. Pack what you need for a few days. I've already contacted a lawyer. We'll communicate through them from now on. You're serious? Just like that, we're over? We were over the moment you decided to betray everything we built together, I said. You just didn't bother to tell me. Jason's expression hardened. This is my house too. You can't just kick me out. Actually, I can, I replied, pulling out a document my lawyer had prepared. Unless you want me to file a police report about the financial fraud I've documented. $30,000 is grand theft in Illinois. His face contorted with anger. So, that's it? You're going nuclear? What happened to the woman I married? She trusted you, I said simply. That was her mistake. The argument continued for another hour, cycling through blame, guilt, anger, and brief moments of shared grief for what we had lost. Eventually, exhausted and hoarse from yelling, Jason packed a suitcase and left, claiming he was going to a hotel, not to Megan's place. I didn't believe him, nor did I care anymore. After he left, I walked through our home in a daze. In the living room, our wedding photo still sat prominently displayed, both of us beaming, his arms around my waist, my head resting on his shoulder. I turned it face down. In our bedroom, I stripped the bed completely, stuffing the sheets and comforter into garbage bags. I couldn't bear the thought of sleeping where they had been together. I made up the guest room bed instead, but even there, sleep eluded me. The next morning, I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed, then emailed Jason to let him know he would need to arrange a time with me to collect more of his belongings. His response was a single line. This isn't over.
But it was.
In my mind, it was already over. The man I loved, the marriage I cherished, the future I had planned, all of it had evaporated the moment I heard those voices from our bedroom. What remained now was the painful process of untangling 2 lives that had been interwoven for 5 years. The following days brought more discoveries. Friends admitted they'd had suspicions but, like Amy, hadn't wanted to say anything without proof. Jason's colleague Daniel awkwardly revealed that the affair had been an open secret at their firm for months. My mother-in-law called, tearfully begging me to reconsider, suggesting therapy, implying that all men make mistakes. I hung up on her. Jason alternated between apologetic messages and angry accusations, his mood seemingly dependent on where things stood with Megan, whom he'd supposedly stopped seeing after my discovery, according to mutual acquaintances, though I doubted it. A week after the confrontation, I took a personal day and did another thorough search of our home, this time looking for anything I might have missed. In the basement, behind Jason's golf clubs, I found a small lockbox I'd never seen before. Using the key I'd found hidden in his desk, I opened it to discover more evidence of his double life. Additional receipts, a second phone I hadn't known about, and a handwritten letter from Megan describing their magical weekend, at a lakeside cabin supposedly rented by the guys for a fishing trip I clearly remembered from last summer. The final revelation was almost too much to bear. The weekend Jason had claimed to be mourning a college friend's sudden death. The weekend I'd supported him from afar, sending thoughtful texts, arranging food delivery to a supposed bereaved gathering. He'd actually been celebrating Megan's birthday at a luxury resort. There had been no death, no grieving friend, just another elaborate lie to cover his infidelity. That night, alone in our guest room, I finally allowed myself to feel the full magnitude of the betrayal. I sobbed until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen, mourning not just the end of my marriage, but the death of the future I'd envisioned, the children we might have had, the growing old together, the partnership I thought would sustain me through life's challenges. Everything I believed about my life had been a carefully constructed illusion, and I had been too trusting, too busy, too confident in our bond to see the truth. By morning, something had shifted inside me. The endless crying had washed away something, not the pain, which remained acute, but perhaps the shock, the disbelief. What remained was a hollow feeling, but also the first tiny seed of something else. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but perhaps resilience. The understanding that while I couldn't control what had happened, I could control what came next. With red-rimmed eyes but a steady hand, I called my lawyer to move forward with divorce proceedings. It was time to begin the long process of rebuilding my life alone. The following week passed in a blur of legal consultations, work meetings conducted on autopilot, and sleepless nights in the guest room of what had once been our happy home. Jason had collected more of his things while I was at the office, leaving a note on the counter that read simply, "We should talk again when you're calmer. This isn't how our story should end." His words felt like a final twist of the knife, as if my response to his betrayal was the problem, not the betrayal itself. As if I was overreacting to discovering nearly a year of lies, infidelity, and financial deception. I took a week off work, something I'd never done without careful planning and purpose. My boss, who had pieced together enough about my situation from office gossip and my vague explanations, was surprisingly understanding. "Take the time you need," she said. "The team will cover your projects. Some things are more important than work, Stephanie." The irony wasn't lost on me. That my career-focused reputation was so entrenched that even my boss thought I needed reminding that personal crises trumped professional obligations. Had I really been that one-dimensional? That work-obsessed? Jason's accusations rang in my ears. Cold, distant, emotionally unavailable. The empty house became both sanctuary and prison during those days. I alternated between frantic cleaning, as if I could somehow scrub away the memories of betrayal, and lying motionless on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship through this new, tainted lens. On the third day of my self-imposed isolation, my mother called. We'd never been particularly close. Her own marriage to my father had ended when I was 12, after his affair with his dental hygienist came to light. Perhaps that's why I'd worked so hard to build a different kind of marriage with Jason, one based on honesty and communication. The irony was painful. "I heard from Barbara," she said, referencing Jason's mother. "She told me what happened." I hadn't called her about the separation, partly because I didn't want to hear "I told you so" from the woman who'd become cynical about marriage after her own experience.
Ai finiilid.
"No, you're not," she countered. "And that's okay. You're not supposed to be fine when your world collapses." Her unexpected empathy cracked something in me. "He says it's my fault," I whispered. "That I was too focused on work, that I wasn't emotionally available." "Of course he says that," she replied, her voice sharp. "Men like Jason and your father always blame the woman for their own weaknesses. It's easier than admitting they made selfish choices." But what if he's right? What if I did push him away? "Stephanie Adams," my mother said firmly, using my full name as she had when I was a child needing correction. "Listen to me carefully. Marriage has challenges. Partners grow distant sometimes. The solution to that is conversation, counseling, work, not sleeping with your assistant. He made that choice. Repeatedly. For months. While lying to your face. That's not on you. Her words were like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. I clung to them in the days that followed, repeating them to myself when self-doubt threatened to overwhelm me. On day 5 of my leave, Amy arrived unannounced with groceries, wine, and determined support. She found me unwashed, in the same pajamas I'd worn for 2 days, surrounded by tissues and takeout containers. "Okay, this ends now," she declared, pulling open curtains and letting harsh daylight into the dim house. "Shower.
Now.
I'm making real food, and then we're talking strategy." Too exhausted to argue, I complied. The hot water felt like the first good thing I'd experienced in weeks. Dressed in clean clothes with wet hair, I emerged to find Amy had cleared the debris of my depression and was stirring something that smelled incredible on the stove. "Eat," she commanded, placing a bowl of homemade pasta in front of me. "Then we figure out what comes next." "There is no next," I said dully, though I picked up the fork. "My marriage is over. My life is a joke." "Your marriage is over," she agreed bluntly. "But your life is far from over, Steph. This is just a chapter, not the whole book." After food, wine, and hours of conversation that ranged from bitter rants to tearful confessions, Amy helped me see that I was standing at a critical juncture. I could either let this betrayal define me, become bitter, distrustful, diminished, or I could use it as a painful but powerful catalyst for change. "Who is Stephanie Adams without Jason?" she asked. "Before him, you were ambitious, driven, confident. Those things didn't come from him. They were always yours." The question lingered after she left. Who was I, really? For 5 years, I'd been part of Jason and Stephanie. Our identities merged in the way of long-term couples. I'd compromised on big decisions, the house in the suburbs rather than the downtown condo I'd initially wanted, postponing children longer than I'd planned. Even the vacations we took, always geared more toward his preferences than mine. The next morning, I found a photo album from my college years. The young woman smiling from those images seemed like a stranger now, adventurous, independent, unafraid of taking risks. When had I become so cautious, so willing to mold myself around someone else's life? That afternoon, Jason texted asking to meet for coffee somewhere neutral to discuss our situation. After consulting with my lawyer, who advised against any unwitnessed conversations, I agreed to meet him at a busy cafe downtown, near my office. He looked terrible. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled button-down I didn't recognize. For a moment, pity threatened to soften my resolve. "Thank you for meeting me," he began, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." "About what?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "About us. About what happened. About what I did." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I made a terrible mistake, Steph. The worst mistake of my life. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know how sorry I am." Once those words might have moved me. Now they felt rehearsed, hollow. "Where's Megan in all this?" I asked directly. He flinched slightly. "It's over with her. Completely over. It wasn't what I thought it was." Translation: she'd either dumped him, or the reality of potentially losing his marriage had made the affair less appealing. Either way, his regret seemed tied to consequences, not genuine remorse. "I'm not interested in reconciliation, if that's where this is going," I said firmly. "The divorce proceedings have started. My decision is final." Just like that, his voice hardened slightly. 5 years of marriage, thrown away, without even trying to fix things? "You threw it away, Jason. For 11 months. While lying to my face every day." I gathered my purse, preparing to leave. "Our attorneys will handle the rest." "Is there someone else?" he asked suddenly. "Is that what this is about?" The question was so absurd, so projecting, that I actually laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised us both. "No, Jason. Unlike you, I respected our vows." As I walked away, he called after me. "People make mistakes, Stephanie. No one's perfect." I kept walking, his words echoing in my head. Yes, people make mistakes. A drunken one-night stand might be a mistake. A momentary lapse in judgment might be a mistake. But 11 months of calculated deception? That was a choice. Many choices, made day after day. That evening, I found myself driving to the lake again, sitting on the same bench where I'd first processed the discovery of Jason's betrayal. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks. Nature's beauty continued, oblivious to human drama. I thought about the conversations of the past week, with my mother, with Amy, with Jason himself. I thought about the woman in those college photos, with dreams and ambitions that had nothing to do with being someone's wife. I thought about what I truly wanted for my future, stripped of the compromises and adjustments I'd made to accommodate a partnership that had proven false. My phone buzzed with a text from the divorce attorney. He's contesting. Prepare for a fight. Of course he was. Jason had always been strategic, had always needed to win. The knowledge should have discouraged me, but instead, it crystallized something in my mind. This wasn't just about ending a marriage anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, my identity, my future. I would not be the victim in this story. I would not be diminished by his betrayal. I would find strength I didn't know I had, because I had no other choice. As darkness fell over the lake, I made a silent promise to myself. Whatever came next, I would face it on my terms. The life I rebuilt would be authentically mine, not a reaction to betrayal, not a defensive posture against future pain, but a genuine expression of who I was and what I valued. For the first time since discovering Jason's infidelity, I felt something like hope, not for reconciliation, but for renewal. The path ahead would be difficult, painful, and uncertain. But it was my path now, and I would walk it with my head held high. 2 months after discovering Jason's affair, I stood in the center of my new apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes and unfamiliar empty spaces. The one-bedroom unit in a downtown high-rise couldn't have been more different from the suburban home I'd shared with Jason, modern instead of traditional, compact instead of sprawling, overlooking the city instead of a carefully landscaped yard. The divorce proceedings had turned predictably contentious. Jason had hired an aggressive attorney who contested everything from asset division to who would keep the wedding china neither of us had particularly wanted. My own lawyer assured me this was typical, anger and spite disguised as legal strategy. He's trying to punish you for leaving, Patricia explained during one of our meetings. It's about control. When cheaters get caught, they often try to regain control through the divorce process. The financial discovery process had revealed even more deception. Beyond the $30,000 I'd already found, Jason had a separate investment account I'd known nothing about, funded with bonuses he'd never disclosed. While technically marital assets subject to division, the discovery reinforced how completely he had compartmentalized his life, preparing contingencies I hadn't imagined necessary. The house had been listed for sale, neither of us wanting to remain there with its tainted memories. The proceeds would be held in escrow until the divorce was finalized. In the meantime, I'd used some of my personal savings to lease this apartment, needing a fresh start in a space untouched by betrayal. Weekly therapy sessions had become my anchor during this turbulent time. Dr. Lillian Rivera, a compassionate but no-nonsense psychologist specializing in betrayal trauma, had helped me navigate the emotional minefield of divorce. The opposite of trust isn't distrust, she told me during an early session. It's discernment. You're not learning to never trust again. You're learning to trust more wisely, including trusting yourself. Those words resonated deeply as I worked to understand how I'd missed the signs of Jason's infidelity. Not to blame myself for his choices, but to recognize patterns I might avoid in the future. Slowly, I began reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. College roommates, former colleagues, neighbors from my first apartment building. People who had known me before I was part of a couple, who remembered the ambitious, independent woman I'd once been. There was Sophie from my first marketing job, now running her own agency in Milwaukee, who drove down for a weekend and helped me assemble IKEA furniture while reminiscing about our 20s. There was Marcus, my study partner from business school, who invited me to join his trivia team's weekly gatherings at a local pub. Most surprisingly, there was Daniel, Jason's former colleague who had awkwardly admitted knowing about the affair. He reached out via LinkedIn with a simple message. For what it's worth, many of us thought you deserved better. If you ever want to know more about what happened at the firm, I'm willing to talk. Over coffee one afternoon, Daniel revealed the full extent of office knowledge about Jason and Megan's relationship. It started at the holiday party the year before last, he explained uncomfortably. Nothing happened that night, but everyone noticed the way they interacted. By February, they were taking the same lunch breaks. By March, they were barely hiding it. And no one thought to tell me? I asked, the hurt evident in my voice. Daniel looked genuinely remorseful. I barely knew you. Others who knew you better, they said Jason had told them you were having problems, that you were distant, focused on your career. Some believed you might even have an arrangement. He shrugged helplessly. Office gossip is rarely accurate, but it creates a narrative people accept. The conversation was painful, but oddly cathartic. It confirmed that I hadn't been crazy or paranoid. The signs had been there for anyone paying attention. That I hadn't been paying attention was something I needed to accept and learn from. In my professional life, I threw myself into work with renewed focus. The distraction was welcome, but more than that, I found genuine satisfaction in achievements that were entirely my own. I led a pitch team that landed Marshall Pharmaceuticals, a client worth millions to our firm. The success was especially sweet given Jason's previous comment that I couldn't handle accounts of that caliber. My personal transformation extended beyond the professional. I cut my long brown hair into a stylish bob, started taking kickboxing classes that helped channel my anger into physical strength, and joined a hiking group that explored trails around Chicago every other weekend. Each change was a deliberate step away from the woman who had been betrayed and towards someone new, someone stronger, more self-aware, more intentional about her choices. Not running from pain, but growing through it. Then came the day I literally ran into Megan Phillips. I was grabbing coffee at a shop near my office when I turned from the counter and nearly collided with her. For a moment, neither of us spoke, mutual recognition rendering us speechless in the busy cafe. She looked different than I remembered, smaller somehow, less threatening now that I knew exactly who and what she was. Her eyes widened with what appeared to be genuine discomfort. Stephanie, she finally managed. I didn't. I'm sorry. I can go somewhere else. I should have hated her. Part of me did. But standing there, I mostly felt a strange detachment, as if she were a character from a movie I'd seen long ago rather than the woman who had helped destroy my marriage. It's fine, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. It's a public place. An awkward silence followed as the barista called my name. I collected my drink, then turned back to Megan, a sudden curiosity overcoming my desire to escape. Can I ask you something? She nodded, clearly uncomfortable but seemingly resigned to the conversation. Did he tell you our marriage was over? That we were having problems? Megan's gaze dropped to the floor. He said you were essentially roommates, that you'd grown apart, that you were focused on your career to the exclusion of everything else. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. He said you were discussing separation but wanted to wait for the right time professionally. I nodded, having expected as much. None of that was true. I know that now, she said quietly. For what it's worth, it ended between us right after you found out. She hesitated. He wasn't who I thought he was either. He rarely is, I replied, surprised by the lack of bitterness in my voice. Goodbye, Megan. Walking away, I felt an unexpected lightness. Not forgiveness. I wasn't there yet, might never be, but perhaps the first step toward releasing the power this woman had held over my emotions. She too had been deceived, albeit in different ways and with far less justification for her choices. That evening, I received a text from Jason. We need to talk about the house offer. Also, I've been thinking about us. Maybe we acted too hastily. The message might once have thrown me into emotional turmoil. Now it merely confirmed what I already suspected. Things hadn't worked out with Megan, and Jason was testing whether I might be his backup plan. My response was brief and definitive. Contact my lawyer regarding the house. There is no us to discuss. His follow-up came minutes later. You're really going to throw away 5 years without even trying? This isn't the Stephanie I married. I stared at those words. This isn't the Stephanie I married, and felt a surge of something like pride. He was right. I wasn't the same woman he had married. That woman had trusted too easily, compromised too readily, and lost sight of her own worth in the process of building a life with someone who hadn't deserved her. The woman I was becoming was stronger, wiser, and unwilling to accept anything less than genuine partnership and respect. The betrayal had broken me, yes, but I was reassembling the pieces into something more resilient than before. As summer turned to fall, the divorce proceedings continued their tedious course. The house sold, the assets were cataloged for division, and depositions were taken documenting Jason's infidelity, not because Illinois law particularly cared about the cause of our divorce, but because his financial deceptions were relevant to the settlement. Through it all, I maintained the routines that were rebuilding my sense of self. Therapy, work, exercise, friendships both old and new. I started dating again, nothing serious, just coffee or dinner with men who seemed interesting and kind. Some connections sparked, others fizzled. But each interaction helped me remember that I was more than the sum of my marital experiences. In October, 7 months after discovering the affair, I attended a marketing conference in Boston. During a networking reception, I found myself engaged in animated conversation with a silver-haired woman named Judith Barrett, the founder of a major digital marketing agency. You've got good instincts, she said after I shared some thoughts on an emerging trend. And you speak with conviction. That's rarer than you might think. Thank you, I replied, genuinely flattered by her assessment. I've learned recently that trusting my instincts is important in all areas of life, not just business. She studied me with shrewd eyes. Sounds like there's a story there. I gave her the abbreviated version: marriage, betrayal, divorce, rebuilding. Not seeking sympathy, just acknowledging the context of my comment. Judith nodded thoughtfully. I went through something similar in my 30s. Husband cheated with my cousin, if you can believe it. At the time, it felt like the end of the world. And now? I asked. She smiled, gesturing around the crowded reception. Now I run one of the top agencies in the country, have 2 amazing adult children from my second marriage, and honestly can't remember what I ever saw in my first husband. She leaned in conspiratorially. The best revenge isn't just living well, it's becoming so occupied with your own fulfilling life that you genuinely forget to be bitter. Later that night, alone in my hotel room, I reflected on Judith's words. The pain of Jason's betrayal was still present, but it no longer defined my daily existence. It had become one chapter in my ongoing story rather than the climax around which everything else revolved. For the first time, I could envision a future where the affair was a distant memory, a painful experience that had ultimately led me toward a more authentic life. Not because betrayal was a gift, it wasn't, but because surviving it had revealed strengths I might never have discovered otherwise. The woman in the mirror wasn't the same one who had stood frozen in her hallway 8 months ago, her world collapsing around her. This woman had been broken and had put herself back together, piece by piece, decision by decision, day by day. She wasn't perfect or completed or healed beyond all wounding, but she was real in a way she hadn't been before. Tested by fire and emerging stronger, more herself than she had ever been. And that, I was beginning to understand, was its own kind of victory. 1 year to the day after discovering Jason's affair, I stood in the courtroom as the judge declared our divorce final. The proceedings had been tedious, occasionally bitter, and extraordinarily expensive, but they were over. Legally and officially, I was no longer Stephanie Adams' wife. I was simply Stephanie Adams on my own. The symbolism of the date wasn't lost on me. I had deliberately scheduled the final hearing for the anniversary of that fateful morning when I'd returned home for my forgotten keys. 1 year of pain, growth, setbacks, and ultimately rebuilding. My attorney, Patricia, shook my hand outside the courtroom. Congratulations. All things considered, the settlement is quite favorable. The financial aspects had indeed worked in my favor once Jason's hidden accounts were exposed. The judge had been unimpressed by his attempts to conceal assets, awarding me a greater percentage of our marital property than might otherwise have been standard. I'd received the full $30,000 he'd secretly withdrawn, plus half of the undisclosed investment account. What happens now? I asked, suddenly aware that the legal framework that had structured my life for months was gone. Patricia smiled slightly. Now you live your life, Stephanie. The rest is up to you. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Amy. Court done? Still on for celebration dinner. I smiled and texted back. All done. Officially divorced. See you at 7. Later that evening, surrounded by my closest friends at a favorite restaurant, I raised a glass of champagne. To endings that become beginnings, I said. And to all of you who helped me through the darkest year of my life. Amy squeezed my hand. We're just glad to have the real Stephanie back. Her words echoed what I'd been feeling myself, that somewhere in the process of healing from betrayal, I'd rediscovered parts of myself that had been submerged during my marriage. Not because Jason had deliberately suppressed them, but because the nature of compromise in relationships sometimes involves the gradual surrendering of individual preferences, habits, and even dreams. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected email from Jason. I almost deleted it unread, but curiosity won out. Stephanie, it began. I heard the divorce was finalized. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to say something without lawyers as intermediaries. What I did was unforgivable. Not just the affair, but the lying, the gaslighting when you confronted me, the financial deceptions. I've been seeing a therapist who's helping me understand why I made such destructive choices. Not to excuse them, but to ensure I never repeat them. I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the pain I caused, and I am genuinely sorry. You deserved better. Jason. I read the email 3 times, trying to discern whether it was sincere or another manipulation. In the end, I decided it didn't matter. His apology, whether genuine or not, had no bearing on my life moving forward. I didn't respond. 3 days later, I learned through mutual friends that Megan and Jason's relationship had imploded spectacularly months ago when he discovered she'd been seeing someone else, a karmic symmetry that might have brought me satisfaction earlier in the year, but now seemed merely sad. 2 flawed people who had hurt others were now hurting each other. There was no victory in that, only waste. As winter thawed into spring, my professional life flourished. The success with Marshall Pharmaceuticals had led to additional responsibilities and recognition. My boss, impressed with my performance despite personal challenges, invited me to join the executive leadership track, mentioning potential for partnership within 5 years. The promotion came with an office upgrade, corner space with windows overlooking the Chicago River. As I arranged personal items on my new desk, I realized none of them were from my marriage. The photos, art pieces, and mementos I'd chosen to display all represented either my pre-Jason life or my post-divorce journey. Not a deliberate exclusion, but a natural evolution of what I considered meaningful. My personal life was evolving too. The casual dates of early recovery had given way to more intentional connections. I'd been seeing Michael Lawson, an architect I'd met through the hiking group, for about 2 months. Our relationship was progressing slowly, deliberately. Both of us bringing past relationship lessons to this new connection. I like that you don't rush things, he told me one evening as we walked along the lakeshore. That you're thoughtful about what you want. I had to learn that the hard way, I admitted. For a long time, I thought love meant merging your life completely with someone else's. Now I understand that healthy relationships need boundaries and space. Michael nodded. My divorce taught me similar lessons. Different circumstances, but same realization, that losing yourself in a relationship doesn't serve either person. We were taking things one day at a time, enjoying the present without excessive focus on the future. It was a new approach for me. The old Stephanie had always been 5 steps ahead, planning and projecting. This new version of myself was learning to appreciate the moment while it was happening. In May, almost 15 months after Discovery Day, I closed on a condo in a neighborhood I'd always loved but that Jason had dismissed as too urban. The two-bedroom space with exposed brick walls and enormous windows felt more authentically me than our suburban house ever had. As I unpacked the last of my boxes, many of which had remained sealed since my initial move to the apartment, I came across our wedding album. I sat cross-legged on the floor, opening the heavy book for the first time since the separation. The smiling couple in those professionally staged photos seemed like strangers now, particularly the woman in white, her eyes shining with hope and certainty. I felt a surge of compassion for her, for the pain and disillusionment that lay ahead. But I also recognized that without that pain, I might never have discovered the strength and resilience that now define me. The woman I had become might never have emerged from behind the careful facade of perfect wife, perfect home, perfect life. Dr. Rivera had a saying she repeated often in our therapy sessions: pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. The distinction had seemed semantic at first, but I now understood it profoundly. Pain was the raw emotion of betrayal, the unavoidable human response to having trust violated. Suffering was the story I chose to tell about that pain, whether it defined me as a victim or challenged me to grow. I closed the wedding album and placed it in a box marked storage, neither discarding it completely nor giving it prominence in my new home. It was part of my history, but no longer central to my identity. That evening, I called my mother, our relationship having deepened through shared experience despite decades of distance. "I found a wedding album today," I told her. "And how did that feel?" She asked, her therapist's daughter having picked up some professional techniques over the years. "Sad, but not devastating. Like looking at someone else's life." "That's progress," she observed. "There was a time when you couldn't even talk about the wedding without crying." "I've been thinking about what you said back then, about how it wasn't my fault. That was important for me to hear." "I wish someone had told me the same," she replied quietly. "I carried that guilt for years." We talked for over an hour about relationships, about healing, about the unexpected gifts that sometimes emerge from life's greatest disappointments. When we hung up, I felt a profound gratitude for this reconnection that might never have happened without the catalyst of my divorce. The next morning, I received a text from Amy with a link to Jason's company website. He'd been transferred to their Seattle office. A lateral move that suggested professional consequences had finally caught up with his personal choices. Apparently, the firm had strict policies about relationships between managers and direct reports. I felt a momentary twinge of something, not quite satisfaction, not quite pity, perhaps simply acknowledgement that actions have consequences for everyone, including those who initially seemed to escape them. As summer arrived, I found myself thriving in ways I hadn't anticipated during those dark days of early separation. My newly promoted position brought challenges I enjoyed and recognition I'd earned. My condo was becoming a true home, reflecting my tastes and priorities. My relationship with Michael continued to develop, built on mutual respect and healthy independence rather than desperate attachment. Most importantly, I had developed a relationship with myself that wasn't dependent on anyone else's validation or presence. The fear that had gripped me during those first weeks after discovery, that I would somehow cease to exist without my identity as Jason's wife, now seemed not just unfounded but incomprehensible. One evening in June, as I sat on my new balcony watching the sunset over the Chicago skyline, I realized something profound. I couldn't remember the last time I'd thought about Jason unprompted. He had gradually receded from my daily consciousness, becoming a figure from my past rather than a central character in my ongoing story. Dr. Rivera had predicted this moment. "Healing isn't about forgetting," she'd said. "It's about remembering without being consumed by the memory." The betrayal hadn't defined me. The divorce hadn't diminished me. The pain hadn't defeated me. Instead, These experiences had revealed parts of myself I might never have discovered otherwise, strength that had always existed but had never been tested, wisdom that could only be earned through difficulty, compassion that emerged from understanding human frailty, including my own. If I could somehow speak to that woman who stood frozen in her hallway a year and a half ago, hearing the unthinkable from her bedroom, I would tell her this. The journey ahead is harder than you can imagine, but you are stronger than you know. The life you thought you wanted isn't the life you need. The breaking of your heart will also break open possibilities you never considered. Trust yourself. Feel everything. Keep moving forward. But of course, that woman no longer existed. In her place stood someone new, scarred but not broken, cautious but not fearful, hopeful but not naive. Someone who understood that the greatest act of courage sometimes isn't fighting for a relationship, but knowing when to let it go. Someone who had learned that the opposite of love isn't hate, but indifference. Someone who recognized that the most important relationship she would ever have was with herself. The sunset faded into twilight, stars gradually appearing above the city lights. I took a deep breath of the summer evening air, feeling fully present in this moment of my continuing story. The past was behind me. The future, with all its unknowns, lay ahead. And I was ready for whatever came next. Life rarely unfolds as we expect. Sometimes it devastates us with betrayals and losses we never anticipated. But if there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that our greatest growth often comes from our deepest pain. Not because the pain itself is valuable, but because it reveals what truly matters and what we're truly capable of. What's your story of resilience? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal or loss? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you found my story helpful, please subscribe for more insights on healing and growth. Thank you for listening, and remember, no matter what you're facing, you have the strength to not just survive, but to create a life more authentic and fulfilling than you ever imagined possible.